with Israel. We can't necessarily control what the Israelis decide to do in this conflict. I think the president is trying to find an out here.
No,
rightfully
hold on.
so.
But we negotiated.
But the Israelis are going to do whatever they decide.
If true, but they did back down immediately. They were like, well, Lebanon's not a part of it.
Well, yeah.
I don't think they
we've
really
seen that
tried
mixed
that hard to
messaging
stand
from
up
the Israeli
to
government before.
Netanyahu
They'll take an action and then they'll step back. That's not good to what the president's trying to do.
I'm saying Trump is not standing up to anybody. He conceded the Lebanon point pretty much immediately as soon as they started complaining about it. So.
Abby Phillip firmly quiets Shermichael Singleton on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as pressure builds over Middle East ceasefire talks, Iran's involvement, and the growing uncertainty around U.S. strategy. And as Shermichael Singleton tries to justify the situation, Abby Phillip challenges him directly by calling out the mixed signals and stressing the serious risks of unclear communication and rising tensions, while the conversation also looks at the wider global stakes, including the critical role of the Strait of Hormuz and the influence of proxy groups, showing how Abby Phillip confidently shuts down Shermichael Singleton during the heated exchange on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
What kind of ceasefire negotiation would result in this kind of confusion? Why would the White House allow that to be the case on something such high stakes?
Well, it's not
in
a
moment
ceasefire.
Like
I don't think you can trust the Iranian regime. Now, too, we can't control what the Israelis do, but I do think the administration needs to put some pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to don't get in the way of what the United States is trying to do here. We certainly want to support Israel. I think that's important. But the president wants to open up the strait. There are real economic implications here for the American people. There are global economic implications here. And I think at this point, it's very clear to me that the White House is trying to do everything they can to bring some type of closure to this. Israel launching those strikes into Lebanon certainly does not help, one. But two, what this also indicates to me, which is rather troubling, the Iranian regime appears to recognize they really can control the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. And that is problematic. That was never the case in the past. This creates further issues, I think, for the United States of America and many of our allies in that part of the world. Even if we somehow broker a deal with the regime, can Saudi Arabia, can Kuwait, can others in that part of the world trust the Iranian regime not to close it again when they're unhappy about something? Yeah, and that's an unpredictability that I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah, and they want to toll it. It's not just that it's closed. It's bad enough that it's closed. But they want to charge people money to go through the strait. And President Trump, rather than saying that's completely unacceptable, we need to go back to the pre-war status quo, he says to John Carl, we're thinking of doing it as a joint venture. He's talking about tolling the strait. It's a way of securing it, also securing it from lots of other people. It's a beautiful thing. A joint venture with the IRGC?
No. You know, this is just like when Donald Trump said that he was going to maybe put Trump Tower on the Gaza Strip. Like, that was a way to motivate.
He did also say that, by the way, about Iran today as well.
That was his way to motivating the Arab states to get busy about a Gaza ceasefire plan that they could enforce. This is his way of getting the United Kingdom. You know, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is headed to the Gulf region. He is eager to help arrange a plan to keep the strait open once this is over. This is Donald Trump's way of kicking Keir Starmer and EU in the pants and making sure they do that.
What is his way of doing that? I'm not sure I understand. What's his strategy?
His offhanded saying the United States will be in a joint venture for Iran and told it's so preposterous that this is just another way to throw the chaos there. I want to go back to where we were just a second ago with Lebanon and Hezbollah in Lebanon. You have Iran now basically taking full ownership of Hezbollah, basically saying these are our troops, this is our projected force. That is a big change, and it tells you once again why we had to go to war with Iran. And if the Iranians can't get comfortable with the fact that once this is over with, Hezbollah is out of business, then there is going to be no permanent answer here.
What really stands out here is how unclear the overall strategy looks once you move past the talking points. If there is confusion about whether a real ceasefire even exists, that alone is a warning sign. In high-pressure conflicts like this, clear communication is essential, especially for allies who depend on coordination. Looking back at situations like the Iraq War, mixed messaging often slowed down cooperation and gave opponents room to exploit the gaps. That kind of uncertainty does not show control. It suggests decisions are being made without a stable plan. Another key point people often miss is how important the Strait of Hormuz is to the world economy. Nearly a fifth of global oil flows through that narrow passage, so even the possibility of disruption, control, or added pressure can immediately shake energy markets. We have already seen how fast oil prices react when tension rises in that region, which then feeds into everyday expenses like transport, fuel, and food. So when ideas around it are vague or not fully explained, it naturally raises questions about whether the economic fallout is being properly considered. There is also the longer-term concern about instability growing rather than settling. If Iran is increasingly aligned with proxy groups like Hezbollah, it points toward deeper indirect influence instead of de-escalation. In many cases, reducing conventional pressure does not remove the threat. It shifts it into irregular tactics that are harder to manage. Without a clear diplomatic end goal, the risk is a repeating cycle of tension that keeps the region unstable and continues to create uncertainty for global markets.
Well, I just want to make one quick note on the Lebanon piece because I think this is important. Israel is fighting Hezbollah, that's what they say. But we have to acknowledge hundreds of civilians are being killed. And today might have been one of the bloodiest days for civilians so far in this entire conflict. You cannot disentangle that from the military operation in Lebanon.
But getting rid of Hezbollah will be good for the people of Lebanon.
But my point is today, this is the day one of the so-called ceasefire. Probably the deadliest day for civilians in Lebanon.
But not from the United States. This is from another country.
Absolutely.
But I think there's a couple
here we
points.
are.
So the first is the clip in from Hegseth is saying all the mandates were met. We don't know what they are. We never knew what we were trying to get from this from the beginning. Now, I am very clear Iran is our enemy, which is why it is ludicrous for the president to say we're going to tax together. You can't make a business venture with your enemy. Or if you do, it's bad business, first of all. And they won't, right. And so I think the problem is when we started this conflict, sure, everyday Americans, including myself, are not going to know the intimate war plans, or at least we shouldn't when you don't accidentally send them over Signal. We should not know the war plans of
you had to put
this.
That in, huh?
I did. I keep my receipts, but you shouldn't know the war plan.
Do it again, too. He'll deserve it.
It's a fact.
He'll deserve it.
Okay, right. Yeah. But you should know the war plans of a country, right? But you should know what your desired outcome is. And we never got that from the administration. And if we're just honest, we still don't have that clearly. It continues to move, and that is what feels destabilizing. I think if the president would have come out and said, Iran is our enemy, I want to accomplish boom, 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 whatever those things are, some people would be concerned, some people weren't. But the target seems like it keeps moving. Now, you're right. You said it wasn't the most deadly day for Americans. But the question that I think people are starting to question is like, what is the value of a life right now in this conflict? And Hezbollah is an enemy as well, but the Lebanese people deserve to live with dignity and free. And I'm not saying that Hezbollah is allowing that, but we don't want to stoop to Hezbollah's level. We don't want to be at the level of the Ayatollah. And so when we do not have parameters that we follow and not become a war criminal, it becomes a very slippery slope. And then you start to wonder, like you're saying, so the the EU comes to the table. But do they want to come to the table with somebody who doesn't value a life, whether or not it's an American life or not? And I think that is the murky part of this whole conflict.
I would just say quickly that is a very valid point, and that's a bit of part of the conundrum with Israel. We can't necessarily control what the Israelis decide to do in this conflict. I think the president is trying to find an out here.
No,
rightfully
hold on.
so.
But we negotiated.
But the Israelis are going to do whatever they decide.
If true, but they did back down immediately. They were like, well, Lebanon's not a part of it.
Well, yeah.
I don't think they really tried that hard to stand
from the Israeli government before. They'll take an action and then they'll step back. That's not good to what the president's trying to do.
I'm saying Trump is not standing up to anybody. He conceded the Lebanon point pretty much immediately as soon as they started complaining about it. So.
what really stands out here is how things become more risky when there is no clear goal driving the situation. In earlier wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, a major takeaway was that unclear aims tend to stretch conflicts out and create unexpected instability. When leadership keeps changing what it is trying to achieve, it confuses not only the public, but also the allies who are supposed to work alongside the United States. That kind of uncertainty also makes it difficult to track progress, which is why people start doubting whether anything is improving or if everything is just short-term reaction. Another major point is trust between countries, which plays a big role in global relations. Allies in regions like Europe and the Middle East rely on steady communication and consistent decisions when planning their own responses. If the United States appears to shift its position or gives mixed signals, it weakens confidence and makes cooperation more complicated. This is important because no major conflict can be handled by one country alone. It always depends on coordination between partners. Without clear direction and mutual trust, even strong actions fail to create lasting peace. There is also the humanitarian side, which often gets overlooked in these discussions. International agreements, such as the Geneva Conventions, set rules for how wars should be conducted, especially when civilians are involved. When civilian harm increases, it does not only raise moral concerns, it can also increase anger and push more people toward extremism in affected regions. In many historical cases, civilian suffering has helped extremist groups gain more support and recruits. So even when the goal is to remove threats, the method used can sometimes make the long-term situation even more unstable.
Here we are.
Well, and also, I mean, they were part of the ceasefire deal. I mean, I think the fact that J.D. Vance, who is our chief negotiator in all of this, or he's becoming, based on like what the negotiations are going to look like moving forward, is now saying that this whole thing on Lebanon and the ceasefire was a misunderstanding. It is amateur hour, and you're dealing with a whole bunch of incompetent individuals. If you can't negotiate a ceasefire and exactly what that ceasefire means, the fact that there are so many lives in Lebanon that are now, people were killed. Don't you think if you were part of the U.S. government, you would be able to have a clear deal, but instead, this has only led to chaos. And the victory that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth said yesterday and today that this whole ceasefire was a deal. There's nothing about this deal, this ceasefire, that is actually a victory. At the end of the day, there are people who died, and
the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. I think where we are is that all the sides do not agree on what they agreed to. Here is the Iran Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf saying in a tweet that one of the violations that they're claiming is that the United States has denied Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in the 6th clause of the framework. Are we on Earth and Mars? Like, we're not even on the same planet.
Iran is not the equal partner in these negotiations. They don't have any leverage. We're going to end this with the United States of America having secured the Strait of Hormuz for the free flow of commerce. Iran's going to have given up its nuclear program, and it's going to agree to not fund its proxies. That's how this ends.
I think that's a dramatic
Well,
dream.
they
that
have
is just
to.
a dramatic dream that
and
is not
they
happening.
do have leverage. The Strait of Hormuz is closed.
What we ultimately have is easy pass for the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. Was that the biggest win that we got from this war? Is we now have easy pass in the Strait of Hormuz. When you look at insurers who are shipping, for on the cargo shipments, they're not backing down on their pricing, and that's what the markets are watching. 5 to 10%. But when you look at them, they are it's a recalibration of risk in the market right now. Yeah. It's not we believe this is peace. It's how do we recalibrate this moment, and the markets don't buy it. Even though we're seeing relief today, I don't think
because it's unpredictability.
But I think it's a recalibration.
The markets are waiting to burst.
When a ceasefire is based on unclear terms, it becomes very fragile. In earlier conflicts, even small misunderstandings have been enough to break agreements and bring fighting back quickly. So when officials themselves show confusion, it is a serious warning sign. It points to weak coordination at the top, and that kind of gap never stays limited to paperwork. It shows up in real situations on the ground. When human lives are involved, unclear messaging is not a small issue. It becomes a risk that can easily lead to more instability. Another key part that often gets ignored is the economic impact. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a strategic point on a map, it is one of the most important routes for global oil transport, handling a large share of worldwide shipments. Even short disruptions in that area can quickly raise shipping costs and insurance rates. We have already seen risk charges rise during periods of tension, and that increase eventually reaches everyday life through higher fuel prices and inflation. So when financial markets hesitate or stay cautious, it reflects uncertainty rather than confidence. In many cases, markets respond faster than political statements, which shows how sensitive the situation really is. There is also the broader strategic issue of how influence actually works today. Power is not only about direct military strength anymore. Many actors rely on indirect tools like economic pressure, control of key routes, and support for proxy groups. This kind of approach has already been seen in different regions over time. Because of that, assuming one side has no leverage is not realistic. Without a clear, long-term plan, situations like this can turn into repeated cycles where short-term actions create bigger long-term consequences, and what looks like progress in the moment may not remain stable later on.